Hi, Fred. Thank you so much for joining us on the Next in Line podcast. We're very excited to have you on as our next guest. Now, before we get into everything that we're going to talk about today, I want you to take us back to the beginning of your journey and kind of walk us through how you got to where you're at today. What are some things that you went through, and how did you kind of start off in your career?
Hi, Karina. Thank you. Pleasure to be there, and thanks for inviting me to your podcast. Um, yeah, my career is quite varied, I would say. I was an engineering student, but decided to join an airline as a corporate management trainee because I wanted to see more of how companies work and not just be heads down in technology only. Um, did that for 18 years, but in many different positions: commercial, strategy, a bit of operations, IT, etc. So then I moved into satellite communications. I was asked to help a company that wanted to get into in-flight Wi-Fi. And so I was sort of on the bridge of that. So that was like a natural transition that I could make. And that was, even though it was part of a big corporate as well, it was run as a scale up startup out of a different country, remote
Yeah.
from head office. Did that for a couple of years. Then actually moved to another scale up in the airline operations, but really using AI at a very advanced stage, very early on at that point, using AI to streamline airline operations. And I did that together with Boston Consulting Group, a strategy consultant. After that, joined another satellite company to start up their in-flight Wi-Fi, but also did corporate turnaround. And eventually ended up as chief strategy officer for a regional satellite organization here in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So
Wow.
you won't see it from the background, but I'm actually very, very far away at this moment.
Yes, on the other side of the world for sure, because we're located here in South Florida. Now, I know you just talked about how you worked across startups, scale ups, and major corporations like you are now there today. How did that perspective on leadership impact and evolve throughout your career journey that you just walked us through?
Yeah, I think early on, especially when you're fresh out of university, you think that it's really about um, bringing into practice what you've learned at university. So,
Yeah.
especially in engineering, you want to apply what you've learned in engineering, and it's all about doing your job well, which in a sense is fine. It's great, but I think you learn early on that in a company, it never revolves about the individual. It's immediately around teams and how do you work with others? Do you get your ID in front of the floodlights, basically? Do you get buy-in? Do people support you, etc.? And there's only so much you can do if you play alone. And
Mm.
when I started working, it was for a huge corporate, and this was like 100,000 people in the Air France KLM Airlines group. Um, Massive. And so um, you start to realize after just the first few months already that it's really important how you bring together a team. You start to look at, okay, which people can help me advance my projects, my ideas, etc. And um, I would say the moment I definitely realized this a lot was much later when I actually switched to that satellite company that wanted to pioneer in-flight Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Um, this was set up actually in a really, really smart way, I would say, with hindsight, because it was a new field for the company. So the company was used to doing things in a certain way, but now they wanted to break into a new market. And for that new market, um, the people that set up this unit basically said, you know what, in order to succeed, we must have the free reign in how we want to do that in order to succeed in that market. So let's forget about all the corporate rules and the ways we were doing it, etc. We must have the free reign in doing things our way. And
Yeah.
in order to allow us to do that, we should be at some distance from the head office so that we don't get people constantly watching our backs and seeing what we're doing and second guessing whatever steps we're taking. And basically, put us in a little cocoon and let us do whatever we want to do. And we will make mistakes. But also because we are far away from head office, we will be a small team, so we can pivot quickly and so on. And this was quite an amazing ride because we built this up from scratch. And I think when I joined, I was employee number 30 or something in the unit. And by the time this was set up, we were like 250. So, and that was in about 3 years. So we were hiring people on a weekly basis, and we
Oh,
got
yeah.
really efficient at it. Like this was a process. I was in the leadership team, and one day a week there would be like 3 or 4 people coming in for interviews for positions, not just for my team but also for other teams.
Yeah.
And we, as senior leadership, we would all have a quick interview with these people. And of course the hiring manager was the key one for the decision making, but it was supported by HR and the other leadership just pitched in, gave their view. And it turned out that very quickly we could establish what it was we needed at that moment. And so we were hiring people that could thrive in an environment which was not very structured. People's job description were just like a guideline, basically. And we always asked them to do more or different things. And there are people that thrive in those environments, right? There's
Yeah.
people that hate that are constantly looking for the security of the piece of paper that tells them what to do. And here we had an environment where basically we were new into a market where there were already established large players, and we had to make impact in a short time.
Yeah.
And so we had to do the crazy stuff in a way. And we managed in like 2 years to get into basically the number one position in the market. And that was amazing. And it was a lot of hard work, but there was so much energy. And with hindsight, I mean, if the other day I was looking at my wallet from my Apple iPhone, and you see all the boarding passes from all the trips that you've made in the past, right? And it was just crazy. I mean, I
Yeah.
was flying to different countries at least twice a week,
Wow.
and it was just going. I depended on my assistant planning my trips constantly.
Yes.
Going forward, I needed to get her guidance on what do I need to pack. Do I need to pack a warm coat or a t-shirt or something like that? So just trying to say, you need the right team for the right job at the right moment.
Yes.
That is really important. But then the team that you select is such a multiplier. And if you are given truly the free reins, and that was something we had to battle about constantly with corporate who
Yeah.
wanted to take credit, wanted to be involved, wanted to control, wanted to have reports, etc., which to a certain extent is very valid because you're spending their money. But at the same time, you need to be allowed to do the crazy stuff. And if you let people that you've hired, talent, do their thing without controlling them, man, you can unlock an amazing amount of results, of performance, of creativity in everything. And that for me was a real game changer because I came from this really big corporate environment.
Yeah.
And okay, you find your way, and there's lots of politics, etc. And there's politics too in smaller organizations, but this was something that had a very, very clear, big, hairy, audacious goal. And we had a clear target in 10 years. This is what we want to contribute to the bottom line. This is what we're here for, right? And everybody felt the pressure and felt it was a challenge, but they wanted to beat the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of team we could form. And I still meet with people from that period. I still run into them. I still
Wow.
have drinks with people from that time. And every time people come up to me and just unsolicited tell me like, wow, I mean, that was really special that we had that. So just saying, it's not obvious. It's not something you find everywhere. You have to work hard for it. But you need to have the right conditions. And if you have those conditions, it's amazing what you can do. And I'm also still amazed how many companies waste the opportunity in a way by not giving or by imposing so many restrictions basically
Yeah.
that you're prideful the teams. And I've seen this again when I was in the AI scale up, and at the same time, I've also seen negative examples of it where companies are extremely hampered by their history, and are just not able to let go of the culture that they have developed over the years. Which, and I'm not necessarily saying that is bad. It's just that they have developed a certain way of working or certain culture or certain rules because in the past that was apparently what was needed. But when the times change, they
Yeah.
then lack the ability very often to change and to adjust to the new time frame. And when that happens, you basically see companies die off. They literally go the way of the dinosaur. And you see it, you witness it, you point it out, you can talk about it, and still companies don't change. And
Yeah.
and you can predict where they will go. And yeah, I mean, if people don't want to listen, it's like the horses and bringing them to the water, right? You can bring them to the water, but you can't force them to drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's just maybe natural evolution and is bound to happen. And in those situations, it's good that there's free competition, right? And that there's others stepping in and doing it in a different way and taking over, and that's good.
Yeah, of course. And another thing I wanted to point out too, and now I'm curious that shared this story with us. It's like, okay, now you built this culture where everyone has the same goal and trying to take on that challenge. And I think a big part of that too is that everyone is holding themselves accountable. And then the people that are overseeing it are also accountable for the people delivering. I feel like that's another thing that I've witnessed so far too with some companies as well. It's like they have this amazing culture, but where's the accountability part? Because if you don't have accountability, how are you going to be able to execute and get to that goal? Culture is nice, but at the end of the day, there's things that need to get done to move the needle and hit the goals of the company and all of that. So it's amazing to hear that you were able to do both, and people still talk about that today. So that is super impactful on someone's journey as well, which is amazing to hear.
Absolutely. And I well, on the last point, I think it's great to see that, you've brought together a team, and
Yes.
then for a while, and then you've sort of achieved what you wanted to achieve, and things change, etc. And then sort of the team flies out again, right? People
Yeah,
end up in many different places. But I like to think that they will bring some of that experience with them to all
exactly.
these different places. And it's like little seeds that hopefully they will plant in these other places. And in some of these places, they will start to grow, and it will spread, right? And in some places it will just not be fertile, and they will not be able to share that. But I know those people will still cherish the experience, and I still cherish the experience. And let's be clear. I mean, this is this is a mutual kind of interaction, right? It's not something that leadership on its own can bring. It's also not something that people on their own can bring. It is an interaction, and
Yeah.
you have to try and bring that together. And I know it's kind of a vague subject. I mean, I'm an engineer. I like formulas. I like to have a recipe that says, okay, this and this and this is what you have to do, and it's always going to be successful. Unfortunately, it's not like that. Circumstances are different. People are different.
Yeah.
Timing is different. So it doesn't always work like that. Just going quickly back to your other point, accountability. Yes, accountability is extremely important. Um, there is one but, and that is, when you try to change something and when you try to scale and build something, you're gonna have to be different than what was there before.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to experiment and try things. And if you experiment and try things, many things will not work out, right? And that is good. And I want to emphasize that it's important to embrace that. And the first place that I encountered that was actually not in all those scale-up startups, etc., but it was actually in that big corporate KLM airlines,
Yeah.
the Dutch national airline. When I joined, they had just gone through a massive shift in the market. as you know, airlines in the past, or maybe you don't know, were really, really regulated. So like countries made deals with each other. Your national airline can fly like twice a week with such an aircraft to my country, and then in exchange you get the same amount of seats that you can fly with your national airline, and this is the price that we will agree on, etc. And in the US, that changed when they liberalized the airline market, and that was a big shift, and that led to all the consolidation of airlines that we've seen going on in the past years, where you ended up with what is it, the big four that you have nowadays. In
Yeah.
Europe, they started doing that 20 years later. So at the end of the 90s, when I joined the airline, and they already, from a strategy perspective, realized that this was, like in the US, going to have major impact on how European airlines functioned, and they would have to consolidate probably and things like that. And one of the things that they also realized was that airlines are pretty much a commodity, right? As much as you hear the marketing speak about things, many of the actual product is the same. They all
Yeah.
fly with Boeing or Airbus aircraft. They all buy their seats from a few suppliers. They all have this sort of similar meals. You're limited to what you can do on board, right? So in the end, if you have a commodity, it's like Coca-Cola and Pepsi Cola and so on. You need to create a brand and a brand experience that sort of sets you apart, right? It's no longer going to be about a regulated market and just sit back and just operationalize this and you earn your money. You're going to have to differentiate based on marketing. So they brought in a very experienced brand manager, and she created this new team, and nobody was aware of marketing. Marketing now all of a sudden had to sort of like become the dominant player that
Yes.
dictated inside the company how things had to go. And that was unheard of. I mean, the most important people were like the people running the operation or the pilots, and marketing is going to tell us what we have to do. And so that was really weird. But they realized that in a commoditized market, this was what was going to make the difference.
Yeah.
Um, and so they were like this really small group of almost the pirates within the airline that had to change something, that had to change the way of working. And this was not even externally, this was just internally, right? You had
Internal.
to change mindset and processes. And so that created that because it was a small team that had to convince the rest of the airline, that created a huge team spirit within the team. And to come back to your point about transparency, they created a trophy where every month or so they would call out the person who had the most dramatic failure in his or her project or whatever
No
thing
way.
that they were trying to achieve within the airline. And they would have that person come up in front of the whole group and, like a case study, explain what the goal was, what had been done, and what had
Yeah.
happened, and was such a failure. Not to punish that person, but basically to present what they call the, freely translated, the sort of "oh my god" trophy, like
Yeah.
"oh god," what a disaster kind of thing. Um, and it was done out of transparency to show, you know, don't give up. We all
Yeah.
have these experiences where things are a big failure, but yeah, we take two steps back, but in the end, we take one step forward, and we have to be persistent, and we have to go. And now it's a small group, but we'll gain momentum. We'll get more people to support us. It will become more mainstream, etc. We will eventually make this change.
Yeah.
And and so that was an example for me of accountability, where the accountability is not the typical accountability like, oh, we're going to shout at you when at the end of the quarter you haven't made your numbers.
Yeah.
Uh, but we're saying, no, we're a team. We're in this all together. You were given a task. One of the tasks is really important for us, and we didn't succeed. We as a team didn't succeed. And yes, you were tasked doing it, and you have to give us this feedback, and it's great that you are giving this feedback, and we should all learn from it so that as a team we get better. And if you do the accountability that way, I think it turns into something positive. And sometimes you hear people saying, like Edison, before he succeeded with the light bulb, he found like 200 ways not to build a good light bulb, right? Because of all the failures that he had in his laboratory. So and that's the kind of accountability how I see it as a leader, and I try to be transparent on what we are achieving, and I do expect everybody to be a team player and fighting for the same goals, but in the end you need to get there as a team. And so if somebody needs help, let's find out and let's see, maybe we can help that person, or maybe somebody else has another creative idea of how to do it, right? And so giving feedback, being transparent in how you're achieving things and what is working, what is not working, and being honest about it, that to me works best in a lot of environments. Unfortunately, in very political environments, people will try to use that against you.
Yeah.
And they will say, oh, 10 failures. So, they can't do it. So give me that department, give me that budget. That's the kind of, and unfortunately that is a very horrible kind of attitude in my view. And that doesn't really work to change anything. So that is typical of environments where people just want to maintain the status quo and not change anything. And if that's the environment, basically condoned from the board downwards, in the end you have to draw your conclusions and say, okay,
Yeah.
this is not going to be the environment where I'm going to thrive, or where the change that you've asked me to realize is going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that creating that environment where you're necessarily like you're able to make them feel comfortable to fail, and that's how they're going to grow, and they know that that's how they're going to get to the end goal is very, I think, comforting to hear too, because that's what's needed in a lot of environments that I've seen so far, and just from what I've heard through everyone else's journeys. And it's cool to hear that that's something that was implemented, and now look how it turned out. Like, it turned out great, and all these people carry that with them everywhere else they went. So that's super cool to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look, when you reach a position of leadership, many people instinctively think that everybody's looking at you to give all the answers.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to slip into that role. And I think one of the most powerful things is that you try to train yourself, that you come into the room and there's a bunch of people sitting around the table for a certain topic, and you try to be the one that speaks the least
Yeah.
as the senior person. Let it be with the people. I mean, they are the experts. Let them do their thing. Encourage them, um, but don't try to take over. Or as soon as you start speaking as the most senior person in the room, the rest of the rest of the discussion stops, and people will not contribute anymore. They will just say, okay, the direction has been given. That's where he wants to go, even if you're not sure. So that's, in my view, very dangerous. It's an easy pitfall, because you have a busy schedule, you want to have the meeting over with quickly, so you're like, okay, I've heard two words, I draw my conclusions, and let's take a decision and let's go. And uh, there are times when that is called for, but typically it's usually better to challenge people and to get the facts on the table and to hear their perspectives, and to encourage them to go in the right direction. So maybe add some things to what they're saying, um, but try not to take over. And that is a learning I mean, it's a pitfall that I sometimes still fall into, but it's something I've learned over the years, where and it also has to go with letting. It also has to do with letting go,
Yeah.
and um, you have to remind yourself that you're hiring talent for a reason, and you're hiring them because they should be able to do a good job. And
Absolutely.
people, in my experience, are pretty responsible people. Nobody is going to throw away money just for the sake of it. Nobody is necessarily taking crazy risks. So um, let people do whatever they they want to do. Um, the main thing to monitor is that you don't want them to tank the company. Clearly, when there is a $1 million decision to be made, you want to be involved, right? You are accountable at some point, but um, at the same time, you kill innovation and especially speed if you start monitoring or being involved too much. And unfortunately, I've seen way too many managers or leaders trying to be like that. And the best ones are the ones that just step in at the right moment. And that is very, very vague advice, because what is the right moment, right? And that is, I guess, the experience you need to build up over time. And it's fine if you don't have that when you're straight out of college. But yeah, that is what good leaders have. And good leaders know how to set a visionary goal that you can then rally people around. And if you can encourage people to work towards that vision, even if you never reach it,
Yeah.
um, your role is to set a direction and then let people have a go at it. And yeah, look, I'm not an Elon Musk. I don't pretend to have all the wisdom there. I'm sure I have made a lot of mistakes, and I make a lot of mistakes. But at the same time, as long as people come up to you after you've worked with them during a Christmas drinks reception or something, and they tell you like, "Hey, I've so appreciated working with you. I've learned so much from you, etc., etc." That feels like a really, really big compliment that you can get as a leader, and that's not even talking about any substance or did we change the world of AI, or did we change the satellite world or whatever. It's not about that necessarily. It's about those moments that people recall, where they have appreciated working with you and felt that they came out better after working with you than before. And I think if you've achieved that, you've achieved a lot. And you can see that usually back in the results of whatever they've been working on. And so that's what you want to achieve, right? I mean, you want
Of
them
course.
to be enjoying it, but at the same time, you want to get good results.
Absolutely. And I think that's like the most rewarding piece as well, as hearing that as a leader and seeing how you've also, experienced that yourself is like I can't imagine people coming up to you at still to this day talking about those moments and stuff like that, because it truly did make an impact in their journey. And I think for anyone listening to, it's like trying to embody that as well, whether you're a leader, whether they're just getting into their career, and notice the things that, leadership should kind of embody in those environments too. Because I feel like not a lot of people know about that until they're really in it.
Yeah, and there's one thing to add to that, because we managed to create that environment where like all these conditions came together. But it didn't happen just like that. It was
Yeah.
on the back of tremendous discussions and even fights on board level, with constantly other people trying to interfere, be involved, get their fingers on this cocoon, on this environment that we created. And so I mean, I worked with a great president of the business unit who um, went out of his way to have those fights. He wasn't afraid to have those fights. And ultimately, I think it hurt him personally. Um, but he was able to shield everybody else and create this environment. I mean, you can compare it with growing new plants, probably, right? When it's small, when it's a little seed, you need to
Yeah.
give it a protected environment so it can start to develop. And once it becomes a tree, then you can plant it outside and it can take whatever you're throwing at it. But in the beginning, you can't. You need to protect it. And as leadership, you are that shield, and you are the shield for your people. And you don't have to tell them all that. You don't have to tell them about all the acrimonious budget discussions or turf wars or stuff like that. But at the same time, um, yeah, if you can't do that, um, then yeah, it's going to have a problem. And I've seen that also in the AI, the airline operations scale up. Um, it was an environment that was encouraged to do crazy stuff, and it was an environment that was protected by the COO of the airline. He was personally involved, saying, "Yes, I trust you. You can do this."
Yeah.
And that is critical. And even if you're a separate company and you found investors, um, you're going to have those discussions with your investors, and then let the investors be at a distance and let them have trust. And if they cannot bring themselves to have that trust, things are going to be very difficult. Because in the end, they can't run the company. If then it should be their company, right?
Yeah.
There is a difference in the roles that you have, and that's important. But yeah, the thing I primarily wanted to share today is, like, yes, it is possible to have those kinds of environments, and it's incredible to see what happens in those environments. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, as we wrap up the podcast today, I do want to ask you one more question, and it's geared toward the next generation of leaders. Now, those that are kind of stepping into a fast pace, high impact roles, what's the mindset shift that will help them lead with clarity and courage throughout their career journeys?
Well, you mentioned the word courage, and I think ultimately it boils down to that.
Yeah.
I think there's in the US a famous saying about Marine Corps leaders, where they say a leader eats last,
Yeah.
and I think that's the key thing. So when you're young, as I said in the beginning, you think leadership comes from being the best at your profession. You're the best coder, you're the best engineer, whatever. In the end, it's not. And if you want to be the best engineer or the best coder, fine, pursue that. But if you want to be the leader, you have to create those environments where other people can thrive. And that means it should not be about you. You should be, and that is a very personal thing. You should be modest.
Yeah.
And of course, you're the leadership, and yes, you will be giving interviews, and you will deal with the press, and you will be seen, but try to give the stage to other people. Try to give them the environment they need to thrive in, and that requires courage, because it means you're going to have to stand up on their behalf to others. And
Yeah.
there's always others. There's always people, yeah, that will interfere because they want to get the budget that you have, or they think they have a better idea, or their department or their people can do a better job. I mean, there's all these ugly things going on always, and it's sometimes it's also good. It's competition. It's making sure that everybody is on their toes. But as a leader, yeah, I think it's your mission to be modest, and have the courage to defend your people and create the environment for them to thrive. And if things are well, you then have a journey together as a team. You have trust within the team, and you get a lot of energy from the people that are working for you.
Yeah.
And even if things are difficult, be transparent about what is difficult, celebrate all the successes, um, and show people that they're still on the right path. Right. That's what I mentioned earlier with have a vision, know what you're aiming for. It's not about spinning the wheels. It's knowing a purpose. Where are you going? Roughly, just paint a picture that,
Yeah.
and keep repeating that, and then the path to get there is going to be fraught with all kinds of difficulties, and you're going to have to find your way around things. It's never going to be the way you thought it out from the beginning. If it was that simple, everybody could do anything in the world, and it never is. There's millions of things, but you can tackle that, and with your team, you're going to be like 1,000 times more powerful. And that's what you have to keep in mind. And so for young people out there, keep that in the back of your mind. That's how you should behave. And that's what you should want to get from the leadership that you are currently working with. And if you don't see that, take them aside. They're also human. Mirror that back to them. Give some feedback and tell them and say, hey, if you would do it like this or like that, that would make us feel much better. And if you have good leadership, they're open to listening to that. And they will say, yeah, sure. I never realized that. It's good that you're telling me. We don't have endless budget, but we can do X, Y, or Z. So, and again, you can be open with your people about that and take them on the journey. And everybody in the end understands things are not unlimited. Everybody understands things are a trade-off. What they often don't understand is the trade-offs. And then people start speculating, like, why are we taking such weird decisions? Why are we going this or like that? And that's when the gossip starts, and when people are not working on the things you want them to work on. And in the end, it's not leading to anything. So that's it. And it's not all about working, right? It's also about giving people time to reflect. And that's why I talked about the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? The long-term thing.
Yeah.
Because you don't want people to get bogged down in details. Keep the long goal, the long play in mind always. And whether you go left and then right, or you go right and then left, in the end, who cares? You just want to get there, and let people focus on that, and celebrate and take time for them to reflect on, hey, are we taking the steps now in the short term that are actually helpful towards that end goal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, and I couldn't agree more, honestly. And I wanted to thank you for sharing that today and your outlook and your point of view on leadership, because this is something new that we haven't had on the podcast so far. So I know this episode is going to be great, and I hope a lot of people learn from everything that you just spoke about today. So I wanted to thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure, and great that I could give a slightly different perspective than what people have heard before.